This is episode 586 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, I think it's safe to say that the Albuquerque Journal's editorial page is one of the very best I've ever had the pleasure of dealing with from any newspaper in, like the city I live in or the national media outlets, the Wall Street Journal being probably its primary competition, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, as opposed to the paper's reporting, always does a great job on most of the major issues. But boy, the Albuquerque Journal in Sunday's edition had a just absolutely fantastic, devastatingly accurate portrayal of a very real aspect of what's going on here in New Mexico with Trevor cartoon where the governor, Lujan Grisham, is riding next to somebody in a car seat, saying, as she did recently to the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, "We're born to lead." And she's there with her pen saying New Mexico, if you don't get the drift of who she is. She's not doing anything in reality. She's like the little Maggie, the Simpsons daughter, in the prelude to the Simpsons, driving around while Marge is actually doing the driving. Well, just like that, the state of California is in the driver's seat with the steering wheel, and they are clearly in charge. And boy, not only is that just devastatingly accurate with many, many things that our governor is pushing here in New Mexico, especially on environmental law, but then the Journal had a very good editorial in which they, in many ways, echoed a lot of the points we've made about what's going on in the state. They highlight the oil and gas largesse that has really given the governor her green light to spend whatever she's wanted to and do whatever she's wanted to while in office, to very little effect, though. And then, of course, talking about all the myriad challenges that our state faces: crime, education, failing system. And, while the economy certainly looks better than it often does, it's really hard to say that overall New Mexico's economy is systematically being improved and changed in a way that when and if the oil and gas boom does come to a conclusion, that will be in a significantly better spot. So I look forward almost to every Sunday morning, the Trevor cartoon, and just this was a particularly good one, but we've talked about others in the past.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Paul, that we've talked a lot about this. And here's the issue for me, is that we're using an old metric to decide what's really going on with our state. And the governor's using an old metric. She's saying that, well, look how low that, look how low unemployment is. That means we are doing a good job here in New Mexico. And, that's used to be the metric when people were looking for jobs. We're now no longer looking for jobs here in our state. So that's not the metric. The Journal, boy, I would, it's nice when people agree with you. And between you and I think most of the major points that we've made, or that we talk about, whether it be on the podcast or just visiting about things before, are coming through. And that's good that voice is there. I will add that I think there's one more metric, and I have a feeling that this one will be coming forth as well. Is okay, so right now, unemployment doesn't mean anything because nobody's looking for a job. We're many, many points behind the national average and around other states with regard to that. The other issue we have as state now, which is the slow, it's the slow death and that is our demographics are getting very, very poor. We have the age of our citizens is growing. It gets higher and higher. It's not that we don't have some younger families, but when we have them, they have children, they go to college or not, but then they leave. And so we're kind of in a demographic, I think we're in a demographic crisis, to be honest. Now, this is a little bit like unknown water damage in a home. You may not know about it for days, months, or potentially years. But if that isn't corrected as well, I think New Mexico is in for some very, very hard future. And guess what? The same issues that we talk about, crime, a better business environment, a better taxation environment, all of these things that we talk about will also help our demographics, because what will they do? They will encourage families to have children and encourage those children to get an education and stay in the state because there's a job for them in an industry that's not overtaxed and overregulated.
Yeah, the journal editorial does talk about our neighboring states and how they are magnets for people, for economic activity. You don't have to trust or rely on me. You don't even have to rely on economic data. Just go to Phoenix, go to Salt Lake City, go to Denver, which, the shine is off a little bit in terms of Denver because they too have adopted the progressive policies relating to crime
But
and
they've had a
homelessness.
huge run up in
But yeah,
population, huge over the last couple decades.
Yeah, Denver, Colorado Springs. I mean, you just sit in traffic,
Yeah.
and you can experience the fact that they have grown very quickly. Of course, Texas. We did the Guessing Family Tour Day Texas last year, and quite honestly, didn't realize how much construction equipment existed in the state of Texas because the whole darn state was under construction, and that's to deal with the massive influx of people. And there's certainly an element of New Mexicans that don't want to see that kind of growth, but the alternative is not kind of freezing the state in chrysalis. The alternative is that your kids and grandkids move out of state to find better opportunities in those and other states. And real quickly on immigration, certainly the United States can be in a superior position because we are a nation that's built on immigration, and immigrants can help ameliorate the population challenges that not just the United States faces, not just New Mexico. All the New Mexico is in worse shape than the country as a whole. But I think we all want to see those immigrants vetted. They need to go through the citizenship process. They need, whether there's changes that have to happen in Congress and other policies that need to be addressed. The fact is that New Mexico just doesn't attract that many immigrants to stay here to begin with. And we've kind of discussed and seen this through the immigration crisis that is taking place at other areas of the border. For better or for worse, even illegal immigrants aren't necessarily sticking around New Mexico very long.
Yes, we have talked about that, and maybe there's it's happening somewhere we don't see. There's certainly some pressure along, the border communities. Las Cruces has seen some flows, Luna County with Deming, but it seems like people move on and go elsewhere. And like so many others that are moving around in this country of ours, they're not stopping and putting their roots down in New Mexico.
Yeah. And again, that's a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. But
yeah, we are not necessarily saying that we want to be the illegal immigrant magnet for the country. That's not what we're saying at all. But it is just a fact that when people look at where opportunity is, whether they're longtime New Mexico residents or people immigrating to our country legally or illegally, we're coming up a little short right now.
Yeah, if we had an immigration system that was coherent, it vetted people, it made sense, and it wasn't so reliant on government handouts to kind of make these immigrants part of our nation, no matter how tenuously, I think a lot of people would feel a lot differently. And obviously, there's the crisis, and then there's the policy, and those both need to be addressed hand in hand. But at the federal level, predominantly. Now, I had my own take on the governor's remarks in the immediate aftermath of the governor's talk and the coverage of it from the Albuquerque Journal and others. And basically, the governor was touting her accomplishments for businesses in New Mexico as a part of her address to the Albuquerque Chamber. And I took immediate issue with that. So the Journal went more big picture. I was much more focused on this particular legislative session, which ironically, in speaking to the Albuquerque Chamber, and to their credit, the Albuquerque Chamber, which often strays from free market conservative policies, but the chamber did push back against paid family leave, which if you talk to most businesses that actually follow legislation in Santa Fe, they would probably say that the best thing that happened this session was yet another bill that died, paid family leave. That is not the way you bring prosperity to New Mexico. I know this is really shocking stuff, but the governor did not lift a finger to prevent paid family leave from being adopted in New Mexico. In fact, most objective observers believed that if a bill had passed through both houses, that she would have in fact signed it, which would have been a very big negative for businesses. So many businesses, I think it's safe to say, in New Mexico breathed a sigh of relief. But to say that this session had a lot of benefits, or that we're going to see something happen out of this session that's broadly going to improve the business climate or improve our economy, it's gaslighting of the highest order from this governor.
Well, Paul, I can't think of one piece of legislation I could point to and say, boy, isn't that great for business? Because they raised taxes on capital gains, which tends to make it a less attractive place for startup businesses to come to and create businesses, because it costs more to, sell them at the right point in time. Obviously, gross receipts tax didn't do anything.
Don't forget they raised corporate income tax.
Oh yeah, they raised corporate income tax because, boy, that's been, the data shows how effective that is in attracting. So yeah, it's just very interesting that you could even point to that and say, oh yeah, we're so business friendly. And again, if you want to say, oh, the state's economy is doing well, we're back to, well, which industries are doing well? And it tends to be oil and gas and government. That's everything in between seems like, if not struggling, is certainly not growing leaps and bounds.
Well, there's film, of course, heavily subsidized.
Oh yeah,
thanks to oil and
but
gas.
It's not even growing. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of those. It's like, yes, we've poured so much money into it that almost can't take anymore. So that's not even necessarily a growth industry. But you're right, huge subsidy to get that.
Yeah, and the Journal, I forget if it was this week. I think it was this week. They have that pullout section touting our major accomplishments with space, and they've pretty much moved on now at the spaceport from Virgin Galactic driving anything, because of course they're largely pulled out, and God knows what's going to happen with the future of Virgin Galactic. So they're touting these smaller businesses, smaller companies, but we didn't have to build a spaceport. That's the thing, is that so much of what space is all about has nothing to do with building a taxpayer-financed facility.
The big terminal, so
Right.
The kind of space that is not the Virgin Galactic, not the space tourism, is a large concrete pad in a good place that has open airspace. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions and millions like what we built. So,
yeah. So anyway, there are, of course, in addition to the usual oil and gas, there are some bright spots, thanks largely to subsidies provided by oil and gas that are in turn kind of almost laundered through the system for the broader benefit of certain industries. But yeah, in terms of actual broad-based. But this is just an ongoing problem. This is why the Journal can editorialize on the big picture, is because New Mexico policymakers don't enact policies that are broadly good. They enact the targeted policies that help their favorite industries, and so that is the reality of it. And I, I know we're going to talk about the governor's signing of some bills, the tax bill, and HB 41, the gas bill with regard to
clean fuel
standard.
Yep.
Those are the two that, when she eviscerated last year's tax bill, I think the question is, does she sign the entire thing? Does she sign parts of it? That could, if she
vetoes all of the tax increases, we will
yeah.
we will get our hat, salt and pepper it, and eat it here on the air. So
I mean, yeah, if she were to do, she would consult us and do what she needs to do to the tax bill to make that a business-friendly bill. I would be very excited, and I would almost concede that something good happened for businesses. But as it currently stands, nothing good, really, overall for businesses. So we'll see. We'll leave that little window open in case something magical happens by Wednesday.
And it is ironic that the way we think about the session could be good is to take away the bad that will go into effect if it's signed. So it's not necessarily good in and of itself. So
yeah,
for those of you who have taken math, it was we're trying to get rid of the negative numbers here. So.
Right. Now, speaking of taxes and tax burdens, really a fascinating report here from our friends over at Wallethub. We haven't talked about their reports recently, but they did a very good one that addressed where, in terms of your income levels, people are being taxed in the 50 states and how that impacts different groups. Largely, they look at the high earners, middle class, and then relatively low-income people. And I think it's safe to say that this is a really interesting report, mostly because New Mexico, good place to be poor. I know that's a stunner. It is kind of stunning if you actually believe the garbage that comes from so many progressives in our state, because they're always whining about how regressive our tax policy is. Well, they in Wallethub, they note that New Mexico is the sixth best place to be poor when you're paying taxes. So your tax burden is very low relative to other states, and that's nice. Let's see here. So 7.7% in the lowest group, 10.6% in the middle group. That comes in at 38th. And then 10.12 for the highest level taxpayer in terms of their income. So we're rated for 37th, 38th, and then 6th best. So that is the hallmark of a relatively progressive tax code. Now, you can go through this report, and what I like to do is actually determine whether, not taxing poor people is really good economic policy. Like, are these the states where people are flocking to, or are these the states where not so much? And it's actually blue states that are some of the worst states for low-income earners. The state of Illinois, definitely a blue state hemorrhaging people, 51st.
And taxing everything. It used to be they tax everything that's not moving. Now they tax the things that are moving, so they're out of control.
Yeah, so they are one of the worst states for poor people. Yep. A blue state. Hawaii, 49th. Washington State, 50th. So Washington does not have a personal income tax, and that's one of the ways that progressivity is really introduced into the tax code, most notably. But states that are taxing heavily the low-income earners, often blue, often hemorrhaging money. States that are not taxing the poor, Alaska, which I think is fairly obvious because they actually cut you a check. that's a good way to benefit everybody. Different issues with Alaska from a living perspective. Montana, very attractive state. Minnesota, uh, Vermont. Some of these are blue states. My point is that taxing the poor, not taxing the poor, doesn't really make your state especially attractive or especially unattractive, because the poor don't really register when it comes to uh, overall economic impact. So I'm for not taxing everybody as much as we can. And New Mexico, unfortunately, taxes everybody. So um, you know, we are a relatively low state when it comes to taxing the poor, but I would defy you to find how this actually improves our overall economic outcomes.
Well, Paul, and one of the huge costs of living is housing costs. And look at a place like living in the greater Chicagoland area, living in almost all of California, New York City, the places that have, tend to have relatively high taxes along with relatively high real estate costs. And New Mexico is a bit in that. Okay, so there are places that have somewhat lower real estate, but like you look at our most populous cities, Albuquerque and Santa Fe, real estate prices here compared to places like Texas and the Midwest, quite a bit higher. The from my analysis, the kind of shining star for housing prices tends to be in Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, quite a bit lower than for sure Albuquerque and Santa Fe for similar type housing. So that's the other thing. And guess what? We talk a lot about housing prices here, and they're high, but it doesn't seem like we enact policies that make housing prices go down. We continue to put these regulations that keep them high and may drive them higher in the future. And what you might ask, things like having to put electric vehicle charging stations in front of new multifamily units, whether people want them or not. So,
yeah. Now, you look through this report from Wallethub and the best states for high income earners. Alaska is on that as well, but a lot more of the states that you think, oh, okay, these are the states that are really driving the economy. Florida ranked fifth, New Hampshire second, because again, they're very good on taxes across the board. North Dakota, South Dakota, uh, Texas number 10, Arizona number 12, Nevada number 7, um, Tennessee number 8. I mean, these are some of the most booming states when it comes to overall economic growth. And I'm not saying that New Mexico policymakers should only cut taxes for high earners or the middle class, but there is the old line that you subsidize or you pay for what you want more of, and if you tax it more, then you're going to get less of it. And New Mexico can keep its low taxes when it comes to the low income people, but we have plenty of money right now to do some bolder things to make a difference and move the needle from a broader economic development perspective, which it seems means lowering tax burdens on high earners and middle class taxpayers. And if we did that, we would have more of those folks flowing into our state. And we do have the revenue to do it, but we have this mental block from the progressives, so-called in Santa Fe, that would rather keep taxing more of those higher earners.
well, Paul, I agree with your sentiment. The only word that just strikes fear into me is the word bold, because it seems like anything in New Mexico that's ever been marketed and touted as a bold initiative has tended to be let's say neutral is about the best those ever turn out, and a lot of them turn out to be disastrous. Let's do bold transportation like the Rail Runner and Albuquerque Rapid Transit. Let's be bold and go into space where no man has gone before, or now in the second generation, no person has gone before. But again, the bold things that aren't just making taxes lower have not really worked out too well for New Mexico.
a bold change of perspective when
Oh,
it comes to economic policy. That is
that's
correct. Yes, we need just a very thorough reevaluation of past failures, and except for, I think it's safe to say that Bill Richardson's tax reductions were bold, and they were very solid. Didn't necessarily address all the issues that I think need to be resolved in terms of our tax policy. He did not take on the gross receipts tax and fundamentally reforming it, but I would give the Richardson era tax cuts an A minus, which is a heck of a lot better than any other single policy that was developed. Martinez was stymied by the Democrats in the legislature. Richardson didn't do anything much of note that was in a positive direction. He also cut capital gains taxes, but this governor certainly hasn't done anything that I would call bold. So bold like Bill Richardson.
bold like Bill. That's
Yeah.
the strategy. One other bold thing that was done that frankly has been, I don't know, I put this in a negative. I don't even think it was neutral, is the taking the gross receipts tax off of food for all taxpayers, and that definitely didn't as much reduce the tax burden as just shifted around. So, people who were using government programs to acquire their food aren't going to pay, aren't and still won't pay gross receipts tax either before or after. And then what they ended up doing was raising taxes on everything else that the last studies I read, and it's been a while since this has been analyzed, it looked like that certainly wasn't a big net positive for the poor, much less anyone else in the state.
Yeah, very, very well said there, Wally. So, speaking of policies that don't have a lot of science behind them or understanding of their impacts, County of Santa Fe is considering pursuing a plastic bag ban. Now, we talked because this is not the only study, but there was a statewide study that got a lot of attention recently about New Jersey's plastic bag ban and how it tripled consumption of plastic due to the need for thicker bags and people forgetting them or people using them and then them breaking, whatever it may be. The reality is that plastic bag bans do not reduce plastic consumption. In fact, they increase it. And that means more greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I would hope that the well-informed county commissioners of Santa Fe, New Mexico, have read up on these particular reports, but I made sure to share this information, and I think it's worth sharing if you live, especially, or if you are, somebody who votes in Santa Fe County elections. That, hey, if you enact this policy, you're actually going to be doing net harm to the environment. But I think not only should Santa Fe County not pursue a plastic bag ban, but this information should be made front and center for city governments, county governments, et cetera. The city of Santa Fe, the city of Los Alamos, county of Los Alamos, I should say, Las Cruces, Silver City, and a few other towns around the state have embraced these plastic bag bans. And if they really care about the environment, you would think that they would relent and use evidence-based policymaking, but we all know how that goes.
No, we do know how that goes, Paul. And, some of these, there's this thing called common sense, and I'm a big believer of it, but there's also this thing about intuition. And guess what? Intuition is sometimes incorrect. Things that we think, oh, this is how it works, turn out to be the exact opposite. This plastic bag issue is one, and so we're not doing very, very thin single-use bags. We're using a lot of thicker bags and different kind of bags, and it's creating more waste. It's very much along the same lines as ethanol. Ethanol is touted to be, it's this wonderful green fuel. Well, yeah, maybe in and of itself, if you can just magically wish ethanol into existence, it's fine. But the amount of land it uses, the amount of fertilizer, the amount of water, and the amount of energy required makes it probably a net large negative as opposed to just using good old fashioned gasoline. And so, yeah, need to look at the data, need to look at the analysis and see what's really going to happen because you don't get what you want, you get what you incentivize. And what a lot of these plastic bag bans do is they incentivize behavior that does not reduce plastic use. I like them myself. You know, they're very thin. That's the thing. These single use bags are very, very thin. So you can, use an awful lot of them compared to just one or two of these bags that you either have to buy or pay for that replace them.
Yeah. So all very, very good. And of course, those thin plastic bags are often reused in various contexts at the Guessing household.
Involving dogs.
Dogs and trash can liners. So, yeah, evidence-based policy. I know it's kind of a tricky thing for politicians who want to placate powerful special interest groups, but that's the way it goes. Speaking of politicians placating interest groups or just enacting bad policies, Michelle Lujan Grisham signed HB 195. This was done last week, I believe, sometime, where she expanded the usage of a pool of money. They love these slush funds in Santa Fe, especially when times are good. Put money into a fund for economic development and then dole that out. Well, they added housing. This is what HB 195 did. They added housing as a defined use for this essentially economic development fund. And I noted that while MLG giveth, she also taketh away. As we talked about earlier this year, new building codes adopted right here in New Mexico, thanks to this governor, pushing the EV mandates on apartment buildings and the EV charging stations and their electrical equipment at apartment buildings, which are ideal, probably the single best type of housing for a new economic development center. If you're building some new factory, chances are people are going to start out in apartments and then you're going to see the building of more single family houses. But single family houses also requiring EV charging units, etc. And wait, there's more, because I read an article from the Albuquerque Journal, and this is really good stuff, because quite frankly, I know a lot about a lot of different New Mexico public policy, but building codes, a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So anyway, this is an article from October 22nd, 2023. Laura Vassar is the name. Adopting 2021 building code will be costly for New Mexico home building. And this is the same code. So the EV charging station plan on individual homes was done through the same code that the governor decided she wants. So the question is, will the new insulation requirements in the new building code be worth the added cost for the next 6,500 new homes built in New Mexico? And she provides a bunch of baseline information, averages, whatnot. And she writes, in Climate Zone 4, Albuquerque, changing from the current building code ceiling insulation number will have a payback of 152 years. So if you plan on staying in your home for 152 years, you too can earn your money back from all of this required insulation. She notes that you need space in order for insulation to work. You'll see increase in the size of roof joists for flat roofs to accommodate average thickness, more stucco, which also increases cost. So it's not just about the EVs. We talked a lot about the EVs because to an extent, when all you have is a hammer, the whole world is a nail. And I can talk chapter and verse about EVs, building codes, again, a little bit outside of my true skill set. But this article that I provide a link to at the Heirs of Enchantment post on this, which is entitled, let's see, MLG. We got to build houses, and also MLG. We got to regulate houses more and tax them. So that's there's also GRT issues in the housing. Got to get that bingo card. There's a lot of GRT issues in home building that unnecessarily drive up the cost. But you won't see government addressing those issues. It's much more to their liking to create a new fund funded by your tax dollars, funded by oil and gas, and then go ahead and dole that money out. That is pretty much the way New Mexico and a lot of government works across the country.
And so what was that payback period?
152 years.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. Are there houses that are going to be intact for 152 years? Yeah, maybe. But here's the thing. If you believe that the time value of money has anything to do with anything, it's like, what else could we be doing with that? In other words, of saying it's like, are we going to over insulate our houses just for really no benefit? And Paul, one of my favorite quotes, and this was in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but as the gas price spike of the 70s and the gas lines and everything, there was a big rush to switch the type of cars that people liked. And Lee Iacocca at the time had a quote that really, I think, describes things like this. He says, Americans demand economy and are willing to pay any amount to get it. And that's really, that's really what we're saying here, is that we can make these houses use so little energy as they operate, but we're not going to take into account all the energy and all of the costs that's required to do that, to the point where we get to 152-year payback. So not good, not efficient, not smart, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do it. So
ding, ding, ding. You got that right. All right. Final thing. The governor yesterday at West Mesa High School signed 4 bills. She would tout all of them as being related to public safety. I would tout 2 of them as having something to do with public safety, and 2 of them just being gun grab bills. One of those being guns at polling places, the other banning those. So hence the joke earlier about the go bring your gun to the polling place. Just kidding, folks. I know. But please do go out and vote if you have a voting day.
And you can bring your concealed carry, properly permitted legally still, I believe.
Do not take legal advice from a couple of non-lawyers.
No, but I did hear that in the discussion when they were doing the bill. I need to double check on that. So
yeah,
maybe special guns can be taken. So
I mean, realistically, it's hard for them. They're not going to set up metal detectors. They're not going to be frisking you at the polling places. If they start doing that, then we have a real problem.
Yeah,
but
the
7-day waiting period is the other thing that she signed, and probably the most, I think it's safe to say, the most impactful bill when it comes to negatively impacting the Second Amendment and your ability to acquire a gun. But, could have been a lot worse. We know about some of the bills that were introduced. Now, in terms of actual crime legislation, one of the bills increases the penalties for second-degree murder. I guess that's great. We're happy about that. And the other one, if you are arrested for a felony and then you, due to our bail system or lack
get out of jail,
you get out of that, and then you commit another felony. Now you can be held until both felony cases are actually adjudicated. I mean, baby steps there, but sure, yes, that's a step in the right direction. So obviously, the governor, Republicans, most other people who look at the crime situation in our state don't see anything that happened, any of these 4 bills, as being of significant impact when it comes to overall crime. And, I find it bizarre that the governor went down to West Mesa High School, which did have a student-on-student shooting incident, normally you would try to shoehorn something in terms of, well, this bill, had it existed at the time, might have impacted or protected this situation from happening. I mean, why go to the scene of the crime, literally speaking, and tout your new legislation when none of these bills would have done anything to address that particular incident? And to my knowledge, I couldn't come up with an incident that would have been addressed. Maybe, some of the actual crime bills, but not the gun bills. They don't have any relevance to a vast majority of crimes committed in New Mexico, and quite frankly, across the nation.
Yeah, and Paul, it was interesting when you used the term impactful gun legislation, and then you certainly explained it. There's two kinds of impact. The 7-day period, that's just going to just be a hassle for people who are legally acquiring weapons. But nowhere out there is there a 7-day waiting period for illegally obtained stolen vehicles or your Saturday night specials passing from criminal to criminal out there. And, that's where the issue is. And so we're pretty sure, based on the fact they didn't mention it, that both of those guns were bought more than 7 days before. And, there's probably a fair to middling chance that one or more of them was illegal. We don't know that. But again, yeah, the tie for that piece of legislation to the West Mesa shooting, very, very thin indeed.
And, we know that the governor is talking about a special session, but we don't know if she'll actually call one. She was asked about that, and didn't get a full story in terms of what her plans are. Real quick, and we'll talk about this more next week. March 11th is the 4th anniversary of the governor's lockdowns under COVID-19. We're kind of up against the clock here for this particular week, but we want to acknowledge that and note that next week we'll have a more detailed analysis / takedown. It'll be one day after the anniversary of those lockdowns, but we want to acknowledge 4 years ago, March 11th. It's to me in my lifetime right up there with 9/11 as a date that I will remember, not so much because of one image or instance, but it was just such a odd day to note and watch and know that life was never going to be the same after March 11th, 2020. And we'll talk about the policies and their longer term impact next week. But that was, and I don't know about you, I don't know if you have stories or remember exactly where you were and what was going on in your life on March 11th, 2020. But it's definitely a day I'll remember forever.
No, very impactful. And then I'm going to go back and look at what the messaging around was on March 11th, what we said was going to happen.
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
That was my recollection. I just didn't want to shout that out. And so maybe I was the naive one that thought maybe 2 weeks meant 2 weeks, but it obviously did not.
All right. Well, folks, in the time being, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.